Yeah, let's talk about that. Of course, America, it has this great shame. It's not unique to America by any means, but it is a dark part of our history. At the same time, America is the only nation to have fought a war against itself to bring about the end of slavery. So, what did Christians do? How did Christians shape the abolitionist movement in the 19th century?
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. Yeah, so the abolitionist movement was almost solely a Christian movement, Christians motivated by their faith to oppose slavery, to advocate for the end of slavery. And they sent in petitions, they joined colonization societies. Many, not many, but yeah, a good number of Americans thought that the solution was to end slavery and free the slaves and ship them back to Africa. Even someone like a Thomas Jefferson, a James Madison, a Henry Clay, they were all in favor of this sort of thing. James Monroe, most obviously, but that was never a feasible path, right? Something like 10,000 slaves were freed and sent back to Africa. But over the course of the early 19th century, the population of slaves grew far greater than that, right? Multitudes times greater. So that was never a feasible option. So these Christians, they recognized that slavery is evil, and they battled slavery in legislatures and Congress. They tried to prevent the expansion of slavery into the territories, and eventually, and unfortunately, you're exactly right. We had to have a bloody civil war to end slavery. I will suggest that that wasn't necessary. That slavery was ended in other societies that had massive amounts of slaves. Brazil, most notably, but elsewhere, there were a few other areas in which countries in which slavery was ended with violence. Haiti is one of the greatest examples of this. Around 1790 or so, there's a slave rebellion. Basically, all the whites in Haiti were killed, and this just terrified whites in the American South. They saw this as a real possibility for them, and so this is one reason they became entrenched in the defense of
Mm.
slavery, because you just simply, if we were to free the slaves, we would be in big trouble. Thomas Jefferson, in about 1822, described slavery as holding a wolf by the ears. You really don't want to be in that position, but you also aren't going to let the wolf go, because if you let him go, he's going to attack you. So that's not to defend Jefferson at all, but I think it is useful to try to get inside the minds, at least a little bit, of people who are defending what seems so obviously to us to be an unjust and even unbiblical institution. And again, I would emphasize plenty of Christians recognized it as such. I'm a political scientist. Political scientists like to explain things in terms of self-interest, and oftentimes this makes sense, right? You have agricultural interest in Washington, D.C., supporting subsidies for farmers. Oh, that's kind of obvious self-interest. It is almost impossible to explain why these white Americans in New England and Ohio and elsewhere are fighting to end slavery in the American South. How is this in their self-interest? I think it's impossible to understand it as such. It's far more reasonable to understand that they just recognize that slavery was a grave evil and that it needed to be ended.